Ladies and gentlemen, let me ask you something real. What if the people who left weren't meant to walk with you? What if the silence in your life right now is the sound of God rearranging everything to bless you? You're not broken. You're not abandoned. You are being refined, because the most dangerous, powerful, unstoppable woman on this planet is the one who learns how to walk alone and still hold her head high. You want to know what makes her different? She don't chase crowds. She don't beg for love. She sits in the silence and builds a kingdom inside herself. This isn't just another speech. This is your wake-up call. Because once you understand the power of walking alone and looking within, there ain't no turning back. Stay with me till the end, because by the time I'm done, you'll stop fearing solitude and start seeing it as your superpower. Let that sink in for a moment, because we've been trained to run from being alone, conditioned to think that if nobody's around, something must be wrong. But let me tell you, there's a difference between isolation and elevation. There's a difference between being alone and being aligned. The woman who walks alone doesn't walk away from the world, she walks into herself. She's not escaping anything, she's returning to everything she lost while trying to be everything for everyone else. In solitude, there's no applause, no validation, no distractions to numb the pain or feed the ego. It's just her, raw, real, unfiltered. And that's where the power begins. That's where the roots grow. That's where clarity is born, because when she strips away the noise, when she sits in the stillness, she starts to hear a voice that's been drowned out for far too long. Her own. Society wants her to believe that silence is weakness, that being alone is something to avoid, but the ones who rise to greatness, the ones who live in purpose, they didn't find their strength in crowds, they found it in the quiet. They weren't made in the spotlight, they were shaped in the shadows. In the late nights when the tears wouldn't stop. In the mornings when the only thing holding them together was a whisper of hope. Solitude is where she learns to trust herself again. She no longer needs to ask the world who she is. She already knows. And that's dangerous to anyone who thought she needed them to survive. She learns to walk through fire without flinching. She learns to speak life when there's no hand to hold. She learns to speak life over herself when nobody else knows what she's going through. That's the blessing of walking alone. You stop being dependent on external energy to keep your light burning. You begin to understand that peace is an inside job. And the moment you stop fearing your own company, the moment you start to love your own presence, you unlock a version of yourself that the world isn't ready for. A woman who is content in her own silence is a woman who's in control of her own story. There's a sacred kind of power that comes from walking alone. Because while others are chasing approval, she's chasing alignment. While they're scrolling through highlight reels, she's digging deep into what's real. While they're out trying to fit in, she's in her own lane building something they can't even comprehend. It's not easy. Walking alone will test you. It will make you question everything. It'll break your heart. It'll reveal your weaknesses. But it will also sharpen your vision. It'll teach you discipline. It'll teach you who's for you and who's just around for the good times. It'll separate noise from truth, illusion from intention. And in the middle of that process, something beautiful happens. You stop begging for peace and you start becoming peace. You stop running to people who drain you and start pouring into yourself. She walks alone not because she's unlovable, but because she's tired of being misunderstood, mishandled, and misused. She'd rather be alone in truth than surrounded in lies. She'd rather feel the sting of temporary loneliness than the long-term ache of pretending to be someone she's not. Because the woman who chooses solitude is not running, she's returning. She's returning to her essence, to her purpose, to her worth. She's rediscovering what she lost in the noise of other people's expectations. And as she learns to love herself without conditions, she becomes a magnet for blessings. Blessings that don't come when you're busy performing. Blessings that don't show up when you're people-pleasing. These are the kind of blessings that show up when you get real, when you sit with the pain, when you stop running from yourself and start walking with yourself. The woman who walks alone doesn't need a crowd to feel seen. She sees herself. And when she begins to focus within, when she locks in on her healing, her growth, her goals, everything shifts. The world that once told her she wasn't enough begins to realize she was never meant to fit in. She was meant to stand apart. And that's what solitude teaches her, that her power doesn't come from being surrounded. It comes from being surrendered to the process, surrendered to the silence, surrendered to the sacred space where transformation happens, not on stages, not in spotlights, but in secret. Solitude is not loneliness. It's a divine setup, a sacred preparation, a holy assignment to grow, to heal, to rebuild. And the woman who embraces it, she becomes unstoppable. Not because she has everything figured out, but because she's finally rooted in who she really is. She walks alone, but she's never walking empty. She's walking full of strength, of wisdom, of purpose. And the world better watch out, because a woman like that, she doesn't need to be seen to shine. She is the light. In a world that's constantly loud, where people are always talking, always posting, always proving something, there's a woman who's chosen something different. She's chosen silence. Not because she's weak, not because she doesn't have something to say, but because she's strong enough not to say it. That silence, that's not emptiness. That's power. That's control. That's a level of discipline most people can't even understand. Because it's easy to react. It's easy to argue. It's easy to try to defend yourself when people doubt you or disrespect you. But when a woman learns to be silent, when she learns to pull back instead of push forward, she steps into a higher kind of power. A power that doesn't need validation. A power that doesn't need to be loud to be heard. That kind of silence isn't passive, it's intentional. It's the choice to observe instead of respond, to reflect instead of react. And that takes courage. That takes maturity. That takes a woman who knows who she is. She knows that not every battle is worth fighting. She knows that sometimes the best way to win is to let people underestimate you. Let them think you're weak. Let them think you're not paying attention, because while they're distracted by their need to be seen, you're growing, you're healing, you're building in private what they won't understand until it's too late. Silence is where she regains her energy. It's where she hears what her soul's been trying to say. When the world quiets down, she starts to feel the weight she's been carrying. She starts to see what's real and what's fake. She starts to understand who's for her and who's been feeding off her energy. Because when you're constantly surrounded by noise, you can't hear your intuition. You can't hear the warning signs. You can't hear your purpose. But when she gets quiet, when she steps away from the chaos, she starts to see clearly again. She starts to feel her power returning, not in the form of aggression, but in the form of alignment. She'll need to yell to get her point across. Her presence speaks louder than words. Her silence makes people uncomfortable because deep down they know what it means. It means she's no longer playing the game. It means she's no longer giving energy to people who drain her. It means she's protecting her peace. And when a woman protects her peace, everything around her begins to shift. They used to think she was soft. They mistook her kindness for weakness. They thought her silence meant they had control. But what they didn't realize was that every quiet moment was a reset. Every unanswered text was a boundary. Every ignored insult was a sign of her growth. She's not the same anymore. She doesn't argue. She doesn't explain. She doesn't try to prove her worth to anyone who can't see it. Her silence isn't a weakness, it's a statement. It says, I've outgrown this. It says, I know who I am. It says, I don't need to engage to stay powerful. And while others are busy trying to be heard, she's focused on becoming whole. Silence doesn't mean she's empty. It means she's full of wisdom. It means she's learned the value of holding back. Because sometimes the strongest thing you can do is not respond. Sometimes real strength looks like walking away, like choosing peace over chaos, like choosing growth over ego. The woman who embraces silence learns that her energy is sacred, that not everyone deserves access to her thoughts, her emotions, or her presence. She no longer gives people the satisfaction of seeing her triggered. She's learned how to process pain without performance, how to grieve in private and rise in purpose. She knows that silence doesn't mean nothing is happening, it means everything is happening on the inside. That's where the transformation is. That's where the shift begins. That's where her spirit gets stronger, her vision gets sharper, and her soul gets lighter. Because the woman who learns to master silence learns to master herself. And that kind of woman, she's unstoppable, not because she makes noise, but because she knows how to move without it. So don't mistake her stillness for surrender. Don't assume her silence means you've won. Because while you were talking, she was growing. While you were bragging, she was building. While you were seeking attention, she was preparing to become something you never saw coming. Silence is her strength, her weapon, her sanctuary. And when the time is right, when she's fully healed, fully focused, fully aligned, she won't have to say a word. Her life will speak for her. Her presence will make the statement. And the world will finally understand that the quietest woman in the room, he was always the most powerful one in it. A woman who chooses solitude does not choose weakness. She chooses awakening. She chooses to look inward when the world tells her to keep looking outward. She chooses to heal instead of hide. She chooses the slow, steady burn of transformation instead of the temporary fix of distraction. And in that choice, she steps into a sacred kind of strength that very few ever tap into. When a woman turns her focus within, she becomes dangerous to every lie she's ever been told. The lies that said she wasn't enough, that she had to be perfect to be worthy, that she needed someone else to complete her. But she's not chasing completion anymore. She's discovering that she was already whole. She's not begging for love. She's learning how to give it to herself, deeply and unapologetically. Focusing within means she's ready to face the truth, even if it shakes her to her core. It means she's no longer afraid of the silence because she knows that's where the real answers live. She stops asking for permission. She stops performing for approval. She stops bending just to be accepted. Instead, she starts listening to her instincts, to her body, to that still, small voice that's been buried under years of noise and neglect. That inner world, that's where her real power lives. It's not in the makeup, not in the clothes, not in the applause. It's in her clarity, her courage, her commitment to herself. And when she starts doing the inner work, when she starts choosing healing over pretending, it changes everything. Her energy shifts, her standards rise, her presence becomes heavier, not because she's carrying more, but because she's finally standing in the truth of who she is. She starts asking hard questions. What am I carrying that no longer belongs to me? What have I allowed that's breaking my spirit? What dreams did I abandon just to make someone else comfortable? She starts to confront the places where she gave herself away, and not with judgment, but with grace. Because this journey isn't about shame, it's about reclamation. It's about gathering every piece of herself that she gave away and putting it back together with purpose. Focusing within requires sacrifice. It means letting go of distractions, letting go of fake friendships, letting go of the need to be everywhere, do everything, please everyone. She begins to protect her space like her life depends on it, because it does. She learns that not every call needs to be answered, not every opinion needs to be heard, not every invitation deserves a yes. Her peace becomes her compass. Her energy becomes her currency, and she stops wasting both on things that leave her empty. She doesn't just change her routine, she changes her mindset. She begins to understand that the most valuable thing she can offer the world is not her time, not her labor, not her beauty, but her healed, whole, powerful self. A self that's been through fire and didn't burn. A self that's been abandoned but never broken. A self that has finally come home, and coming home to herself means accepting all of it. The pain, the joy, the fear, the desire. She no longer tries to fix what doesn't need fixing. She no longer silences the parts of herself that others didn't understand. She honors her emotions. She listens to her boundaries. She trusts her own voice, even when it trembles. That internal shift radiates outward. People begin to feel it. They sense that something's different. She's not chasing anymore. She's not competing. She's not proving. She's just being. And that kind of authenticity is rare. It draws the right people, repels the wrong ones, and creates room for everything real to enter. The woman who focuses within knows that healing isn't a trend, it's a battle. It's showing up for yourself even when you're tired. It's facing the mirror without filters. It's choosing growth when staying broken would be easier. It's refusing to shrink so others can feel tall. It's walking away from what's familiar because what's familiar is also what's hurting her. But every time she chooses herself, every time she gets quiet, every time she journals instead of texts, meditates instead of escapes, breathes instead of reacts, she builds something solid inside. She builds roots. She builds resilience. She builds identity. So that no matter what life throws at her, she's not easily shaken. Her power doesn't scream. It whispers. It flows. It grounds. It protects. It glows from within. And it all started the moment she said, "I'm done looking outside for something I need to find inside." She's no longer afraid of walking alone because she knows she's walking toward herself, toward purpose, toward peace, toward the version of herself that no longer settles for crumbs when she was born to feast. So while the world keeps spinning in chaos, she's building something sacred in silence. While others chase attention, she's chasing alignment. And in doing so, she becomes unstoppable, not because she's perfect, but because she's present. Not because she has all the answers, but because she's finally asking the right questions. This is what happens when a woman stops escaping and starts exploring. When she turns inward and begins to heal. When she decides her peace is worth more than their opinions. That's when she stops being a reflection of the world and starts becoming a reflection of her purpose. There comes a moment in every woman's life when the mask no longer fits. When the smile she wears to make others comfortable starts to feel heavy. When the noise of the world becomes too loud and the pressure to conform becomes too suffocating. That moment, though painful, is a blessing. Because it's in that moment that she begins to realize the expectations they placed on her are not her truth. The roles they assigned her are not her identity. The life she's been taught to live is not the life she was meant to create. Society has a way of trying to define women. It tells her how to walk, how to talk, how to be soft but not too strong, bold but not intimidating. It tells her to be nurturing but not needy, independent but not too ambitious, to be quiet when she's angry and pleasant when she's hurting. And for a long time, she may try to fit into that mold. She may bend herself in ways that break her spirit, shrink herself to keep peace, and silence herself to feel accepted. Something inside her breaks free. She gets tired of being the version of herself that makes everyone else happy but leaves her feeling empty. She starts to feel the weight of living a lie. That's when the awakening begins. She starts questioning everything. Why do I dress the way I do? Is it for me or for their gaze? Why do I say yes when I mean no? Why do I feel guilt for resting, for saying no, for wanting more? And slowly she begins to peel back the layers. Not to become someone new, but to return to who she's always been underneath the pressure, underneath the roles, underneath the fear. That woman, the real woman, she's powerful, she's raw, she's honest. And once she gets a taste of her own authenticity, she never goes back. She begins to walk differently. She doesn't ask for permission to exist fully. She doesn't apologize for taking up space, for having boundaries, for changing her mind. She doesn't chase validation anymore because she realizes that self-respect is the only validation that lasts. She walks into rooms knowing that she belongs, not because someone said so, but because she decided so. And with every step she takes toward her truth, something else happens. She starts to unlearn the beliefs that once controlled her. She stops believing she has to compete with other women. She stops believing that her worth is tied to a relationship. She stops believing that love means sacrificing her peace, her purpose, or her power. She starts believing that she is enough, not because of what she does, but because of who she is. This woman, the one who's shedding false identities, is not on a surface-level journey. She's not making cute changes. She's going deep. She's doing the hard work, the inner work, the work that doesn't look glamorous, but transforms her from the inside out. She's breaking generational patterns. She's confronting wounds that were never her fault, but became her responsibility to heal. She's facing the pain she once buried under perfection and performance. And she does it all not to prove anything to anyone, but because she finally believes she deserves better. Better love, better peace, better alignment with who she truly is. People around her may not understand the shift. They may say she's changed. They may call her distant, too sensitive, too strong, too much. But she's not concerned with their comfort anymore. She knows that their confusion is not her burden, because she's not living to be understood by the crowd. She's living to be understood by herself. And in that space where she lets go of the world's expectations and embraces her own essence, she becomes magnetic, not because she's trying to be, but because authenticity glows, because peace radiates, because a woman who is true to herself is a force. Nothing can fake and nothing can shape. She no longer feels the need to over-explain, to convince, to perform. She simply is. And that's enough. Her truth is enough. Her voice is enough. Her presence is enough. So the woman who sheds society's expectations doesn't just free herself, she inspires others to do the same. She becomes a mirror for other women to look at and say, if she can live in her truth, so can I. She shows that it's possible to walk away from the life they told you to live and walk into the life that actually feels like yours. And when she walks into that life on her own terms, in her own timing, with her own vision, everything starts to change. Not because the world made room for her, but because she made room for herself. That's the power of stepping outside the box they tried to keep her in. That's the blessing of choosing herself. That's the moment a woman stops living by default and starts living by design. And once she does that, once she reclaims her truth, she doesn't just survive, she thrives. Loudly, boldly, freely, on her own terms. There is something deeply sacred about the quiet seasons of your life. The moments when everything slows down, when people fall away, when the noise turns to silence. At first, it feels like loss, like loneliness, like isolation. But if you lean in, if you don't run from it, you'll find that those are the very seasons where your real growth begins. When a woman stops searching outside and starts watering her inner garden, everything about her begins to transform. Growth isn't always loud. It doesn't always show up in flashy ways or in moments that the world celebrates. Sometimes it looks like crying on the floor at 2 a.m. realizing you've outgrown the life you built for someone else's comfort. Sometimes it looks like spending Friday nights alone, not because no one invited you, but because you're learning to enjoy your own company. Growth looks like choosing peace over drama, discipline over desire, healing over habit, and none of that happens on the surface. It happens in the unseen, in the quiet, in the deep. When a woman turns inward and decides to grow, she starts recognizing the weeds that have been choking her soul, the limiting beliefs, the toxic patterns, the people-pleasing tendencies, the constant need to be everything for everyone except herself. She sees them for what they are, not truth, not identity, but residue from a life that was never hers to carry. And instead of blaming, instead of breaking down, she begins to do the hard work of pulling them out by the root. That's not easy work, that's soul work. She starts to read more, pray more, reflect more. She pays attention to the thoughts she allows to occupy her mind. She stops feeding her insecurities and starts nourishing her confidence. She doesn't pretend she's okay, she gets honest. She doesn't fake strength, she builds it. Every morning becomes a new opportunity to align, to reset, to speak life into herself. And even if no one else notices, her peace deepens, her perspective widens, her energy rises. It's in those quiet seasons that she discovers what truly matters. Not the attention, not the applause, not the illusion of being busy, but her joy, her mental clarity, her inner stillness. She learns to say no without guilt, to rest without shame, to disconnect without explaining, because she understands now her energy is sacred and not everything deserves access to it. She becomes a gatekeeper of her own soul. And don't be mistaken, this isn't about perfection. She still struggles. She still has moments of doubt, days when the silence feels heavy, nights when the past knocks on her door. But the difference now is she doesn't run, she doesn't numb, she faces it. She sits with it. And in sitting with it, she grows through it. That's the kind of woman who becomes unshakable, not because nothing touches her, but because she's built roots deep enough to withstand any storm. Every choice she makes in this quiet season is an investment. Choosing solitude over noise is an investment. Choosing healing over hiding is an investment. Choosing discipline over comfort is an investment. She knows now that what she sows in silence will bloom in strength. The seeds of self-love, of purpose, of clarity. She's planting them daily, watering them with patience, and trusting that in time they will produce a harvest so beautiful it will speak for itself. There's something powerful about a woman who's no longer waiting to be rescued, chosen, or validated. She's not building herself so someone else will notice. She's building herself because she's finally noticed her own worth. She's not trying to become someone for them. She's becoming herself, fully, completely, unapologetically. And that transformation, though invisible to the world at first, is the most powerful shift she'll ever experience. As she continues to grow in private, something within her solidifies. She no longer needs to prove anything. She no longer feels behind. She understands that timing is personal and that everything unfolding in her life is part of a divine rhythm meant just for her. There's no rush. There's just trust. She trusts her process. She trusts her evolution. She trusts herself. And one day the world will notice, not because she's shouting, but because her presence will speak volumes. Her energy will enter rooms before her voice ever does. People will wonder how she became so calm, so confident, so clear. They'll want the light she carries. But what they won't see is that it was forged in fire, in silence, in seasons where no one was clapping, where no one saw her bloom but her. This is the strength of a woman who chose to grow in the dark. This is the reward of focusing within when it would have been easier to escape. And when her season comes, when it's time to shine, to lead, to rise, she won't need to fake it. She'll be ready. Because the woman who grows in private, she's unstoppable in public. Every woman who walks alone knows the sting of silence. She knows what it feels like when the phone doesn't ring, when the invitations stop coming, when people who once smiled in her face begin whispering behind her back. She knows what it's like to be judged for choosing herself, to be misunderstood for setting boundaries, to be labeled difficult, cold, or too independent just because she refused to stay small for their comfort. But here's the truth they won't tell you. Walking alone is not a weakness. It's a revelation. It reveals who's truly for you. It strips away the illusions. It clears the stage of temporary actors so that the real characters in your story can emerge, because not everyone can handle a woman who doesn't need their validation. Not everyone can stand in the presence of someone who's comfortable standing alone, and that's okay. Not everyone is meant to walk the path you're on. When a woman starts walking alone, she becomes a mirror. Her courage reflects their insecurity. Her boundaries expose their entitlement. Her peace highlights their chaos. And instead of owning their discomfort, they project it onto her. That's when the gossip starts. That's when the side eyes begin. That's when the distance grows. But don't take it personal. That's just life separating you from what no longer aligns with your spirit. Solitude has a way of shining a light on truth. When you no longer participate in the noise, the fake friendships fall away. When you no longer beg to be understood, the conversations change. When you no longer show up to perform, the audience disappears. And while that may feel like rejection, it's actually protection. You are being removed from spaces that were never rooted in love, only in convenience. The woman who walks alone isn't walking away from connection. She's walking away from attachment, from codependency, from relationships built on what she could give, not who she truly was. And in that solitude, she starts to see clearly. She starts to recognize who was using her, who only came around when they needed something, who applauded her so long as she played the role they assigned. But the moment she changed the script, they disappeared. Let them, because in that silence, she begins to rediscover her voice. In the absence of the crowd, she hears her own intuition louder. She sees how much energy she spent trying to be enough for people who never deserved her in the first place. And she learns something powerful. Her worth is not up for debate. Her value is not dependent on who stays or who leaves. She no longer negotiates with people who don't honor her soul. And that kind of clarity, it's priceless. Walking alone can be painful. Yes, it can feel like the world has turned its back, but often the people who fall away weren't your tribe, they were your test. A test to see if you would choose yourself even when no one else did. A test to see if you would keep going even when the support stopped. A test to see if you could carry your own name, your own dreams, your own peace without needing someone else to co-sign. And when you pass that test, everything changes. You start to attract differently. People with depth begin to enter your life. People who value your presence, not just your performance. People who are drawn to your energy, not your status. People who understand the beauty of walking with someone who knows how to stand alone. But until they come, until that tribe finds you, keep walking. Keep honoring your truth. Keep protecting your peace. Don't lower your standards just to feel included. Don't water down your essence just to be liked. And don't explain your solitude to people who never had the capacity to understand your spirit. Because what you're building in this season is bigger than them. It's bigger than popularity, bigger than approval. You are becoming a woman who doesn't just survive the silence, but thrives in it. A woman who knows that her peace is more valuable than their praise. A woman who knows that the ones who left weren't losses, they were lessons. And the biggest one of all, you never needed them to begin with. If you're walking alone right now, hold your head high, not because it's easy, but because it's necessary. Not because you're trying to prove a point, but because you're learning your purpose. Let them misunderstand you. Let them talk. Let them walk away, but never let them make you question your worth. You were never meant to be understood by those who don't even understand themselves. Keep walking, keep evolving, keep choosing you. Because when you do that long enough, when you stay loyal to your soul through the silence, through the shedding, through the separation, you don't just walk alone, you rise alone. And that rise, it's unstoppable. When a woman stops chasing and starts attracting, her entire life begins to shift. There's a powerful transformation that happens the moment she turns her energy inward. The moment she realizes that she doesn't have to beg for love, prove her worth, or perform just to be noticed. She understands that the real magnetism doesn't come from being loud, it comes from being centered, grounded, and whole. And that kind of energy, it speaks louder than words ever could. The world teaches women to chase love, to chase attention, to chase opportunities, to chase validation. It tells her that her value lies in how much she does for others, how available she makes herself, how agreeable she can be. But what they don't teach her is how to sit still, how to be powerful in her stillness, how to become so deeply aligned with herself that everything meant for her finds its way without her chasing a thing. When a woman walks alone and focuses within, something remarkable happens. She stops seeking outward and starts cultivating inward. She starts nourishing her mind, protecting her energy, healing her wounds, and embracing her truth. She learns that her peace is priceless. Her time is sacred. Her presence is valuable. And when she owns that, truly owns that, she becomes a force. People begin to feel her energy before she even speaks. She walks into a room and changes the temperature, not because she's trying to be noticed, but because she's unapologetically herself. She doesn't overextend, she doesn't explain her worth, she doesn't compete, she just exists, fully, confidently, and gracefully. And that's the kind of energy that pulls everything toward her. You attract differently when you heal. You attract differently when you stop needing and start choosing. You attract differently when you no longer chase love but radiate it. That doesn't mean you isolate yourself, it means you elevate yourself. You move from desperation to discernment, from proving to preserving, from performing to just being. And it's not just about romantic relationships. This applies to everything: friendships, business, purpose. A woman who focuses within becomes magnetic because she's no longer fragmented. Her energy is no longer leaking into places that drain her. She's whole. And that wholeness becomes a signal. It calls in people, opportunities, and experiences that reflect her new standard, and it repels everything that isn't aligned. This is what happens when a woman chooses to rise in silence. When she chooses to build herself without applause, to glow up mentally, emotionally, spiritually. She no longer waits to be chosen. She realizes she's already chosen. She no longer fears being alone. She finds power in her solitude. She stops asking, "Am I enough?" and starts declaring, "I am more than enough." The journey is uncomfortable. At first, it feels like loss, like you're giving up everything and gaining nothing. But give it time. Let the silence do its work. Let the healing do its work. Because on the other side of that discomfort is a woman who doesn't settle, who doesn't shrink, who doesn't compromise her peace for anyone. She becomes soft yet strong, kind yet firm, open yet guarded, She doesn't allow just anyone to access her life. She no longer accepts breadcrumbs when she knows she deserves the whole loaf. She raises the bar, not because she's arrogant, but because she finally knows her value. And with that kind of self-awareness, she attracts not just people, but purpose. Not just attention, but alignment. And here's the beauty. When she stops chasing, she gives space for what's meant to come find her. The right people, the right doors, the right moments, they all begin to unfold naturally. She doesn't have to force anything. She's not running after things anymore. She's simply creating a life so full, so rich, so authentic, that anything not in tune with her peace simply falls away. This is not about waiting. It's about preparing, about becoming, about stepping into a version of herself that's not driven by lack, but led by abundance. She doesn't chase because she's already whole. She attracts because her energy is pure. And when that happens, when she walks in her power without asking permission, the universe responds. So, to every woman walking alone right now, trust this process. Trust that becoming magnetic isn't about doing more, it's about being more of who you truly are. Trust that your healing, your inner work, your solitude, it's not a punishment, it's preparation. You are becoming a woman who no longer begs to be seen because she knows she was born to shine. There comes a time in every strong woman's life when she realizes what she's been searching for outside of herself has always lived within her. The love, the validation, the strength, the peace. It was never in their hands. It was never about who stayed, who left, who clapped for her, or who doubted her. It was always about her. The moment she chooses to go inward, everything begins to change. And this isn't some gentle realization, it's a breakthrough, a quiet awakening that shakes her soul from the inside out. When a woman walks alone and focuses within, she starts to hear herself clearly for the first time. Not the voice of fear, not the voice of society, not the echo of someone else's expectations. She hears the truth, that deep, calm voice that says, "You are enough." That voice that says, "You don't need to chase, prove, or perform anymore." And the moment she starts listening to that voice, she starts becoming dangerous in the best way. She becomes a woman who can no longer be manipulated by temporary affection. She stops falling for empty words and starts watching actions. She no longer breaks herself down into pieces just to fit into spaces she's outgrown. She no longer sacrifices her standards for company, nor her peace for attention. She becomes rooted, centered, unshakable. There is unmatched power in a woman who finally knows who she is. Not who they told her to be, not who she pretended to be to keep the peace, but who she truly is, raw, real, and unfiltered. And when she walks in that truth, when she operates from a place of wholeness instead of wounds, she no longer just survives. She thrives because she's no longer leaking energy trying to fix broken people. She thrives because she's no longer bending backwards for people who wouldn't lift a finger for her. She thrives because she knows that her time, her presence, her spirit, it's a privilege, not a free-for-all. And if someone doesn't recognize that, she doesn't argue. She just removes herself. This kind of woman doesn't announce her transformation. She doesn't need to post about her peace or broadcast her boundaries. You feel it. You sense it. In the way she carries herself, in the calm in her voice, in the focus in her eyes. She's not loud, but she's commanding. She's not angry, but she's firm. She's not desperate, she's discerning. She moves with intention now. Every yes is earned. Every no is final. Every move is purpose-driven. Because she's done living on autopilot. She's done settling for the bare minimum. She's done waiting on others to define her worth. She's learned how to validate herself in silence. She's learned how to fill her own cup, how to show up for herself, how to cheer for herself. And when she did that, something incredible happened. The right people, the right opportunities, the right energy started showing up, not because she went chasing it, but because she became a magnet for alignment. This is what happens when a woman finally chooses herself. The things that used to shake her no longer faze her. The people who once had power over her emotions are now powerless. She doesn't need closure, she gives it to herself. She doesn't chase explanations, she watches patterns. She doesn't go back and forth, she moves forward. Because healing taught her something powerful, peace is more important than proving a point. The power within her is not loud or flashy, it's steady, it's quiet, it's consistent. It's the kind of power that builds empires in silence. The kind of power that forgives without re-entry. The kind of power that walks away with grace. That kind of woman, she's unstoppable, not because she has all the answers, but because she's finally asking herself the right questions. What do I need? What do I deserve? What am I no longer available for? And when she answers those questions honestly, she moves differently, she speaks differently, she lives differently, and her life begins to reflect it. No more chaos. No more confusion, no more waiting for others to catch up. She's in alignment now, not with the world's expectations, but with her soul's truth. So if you're that woman or becoming her, don't let anyone make you feel guilty for walking alone. Don't let them shame you for choosing yourself. They won't understand it because they haven't done the work you're doing. They haven't sat in the silence. They haven't faced the mirror. They haven't felt the weight of unlearning and rebuilding. But you have. And that makes all the difference. You're not just walking alone, you're walking in purpose. You're not just pulling away, you're pulling within. And every step you take in that direction is a step into your power. Keep going. You're not lost. You're finally coming home to yourself. So, to the woman walking alone tonight, don't second guess your journey. Don't let the silence fool you. You're not being punished, you're being positioned. You're not lonely, you become a legendary. Because when a woman walks alone and focuses within, the whole universe gets quiet just to watch her rise